What's up, everyone? NanMan back with some more modern action, and I've got a nice exciting one for you guys here because it is Esper Ketramose, however you want to call it, versus Ruby Storm here. Now, Esper Blink has a couple of different flavors to it. I know a couple of players have been trying out some different Ketramose builds, specifically with the release of Marvel Superheroes and the Loki course, having some little bit of extra triggers and stuff. This one does lean heavier into the Ketramose. I have not tested out the Loki version, but it is cool to see at least this gameplay featured on the channel, because we are going to be doing a bit of a shifting of the gameplay and the content here on the channel. So let's talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about what the decks are, how they're going to be trying to win this match here, and we'll get into the gameplay itself. But here's the big change that we're going to start doing at NanMan's Nerd Corner is we're going to be shifting things, and Mondays will be our Modern Magic Mondays. So it's going to be consistently always modern content every single Monday for you to be able to enjoy the continual gameplay here. But Thursdays are going to be our legacy content. We are going and playing in our invitational season at our local game store there, which, if you guys are interested, that got legacy every Friday now for the next 10 weeks, I believe they're doing the season for. And then, of course, the top 8 players get to compete for $1,000. So going to be very exciting to see how things go. We had our first week, so that means that this coming Thursday, you'll be able to see our first bit of gameplay from Legacy there. So, we'll get into it. We've had some very, very skilled players. Of course, there was the big DMV Legacy event, and some of the players were able to place quite high at that event. But we'll get into all that legacy discussion on Thursday. Let's get back into the modern side of things. So we see Ruby Storm already deploying the namesake of the deck. So the way this deck works is it has these cost reduction cards. Ruby is one of those big ones here. Ral is another one. It's making your spells cost 1 less. You're going to be basically cantripping in a way, exiling the top cards of your library, and just sort of going through to be able to play a lot of cards in one turn and storm off. Be able to kill somebody utilizing stuff like the, of course, Grape Shot. You could make a bunch of goblins. You could also be able to make some dragons. But on the other side, Esper Ketramose here is the namesake of the deck here. Whenever one or more cards are put into exile from the graveyard or the battlefield, lose a life and draw a card if this happens on your turn. If on other people's turns, doesn't trigger. But it is a 4/4 lifelink menace indestructible, so you can kind of do some life shenanigans and shifting and trading and things like that. So that does give you a little bit of availability here. But getting it out early is kind of like it's a tough position, because it's like, hey, I'm trying to get to the later stages. Can we get there for this to be active? Because right now it is not currently active. It's just a 4/4. But Artist Talent coming out is going to be a really scary enabler for the Ruby Storm player, because they are able to start discarding cards and drawing cards whenever they cast a spell. And so they're going to start out with a ritual here. And this is one thing that is really cool too, is seeing the styling that this Ruby Storm player has for their deck. A little bit of shift and bump at the camera there. That's kind of, sometimes that happens. But we do see the discard there, and I'm going to do my best to track it. The Ruby Storm player is, of course, tracking it on their pad, because that is the most important thing. If you go to a bigger tournament, or you're playing in the RC grinding adventures there and going to RCQs, you need to be able to track it on paper or track it in a way like that, so you know exactly what's happening. You're not missing any triggers, not missing any life totals here. And so we are seeing, of course, the amount of mana that's going to continue to be produced and generated, and I will do my best to track it here, just to make it as easy as possible for everybody viewing at home, how much red mana is floating here. Reckless Impulse is going to get utilized here as we're going to continue to reveal some stuff. Surgical is going to be our fight over, and so this is that moment of, there is mainboard Surgicals in the Esper Ketramose list, specifically because it is focused on the Ketramose side, and we go for one of the impulsing type effects here, and there was one in hand, which is nice. So that was the Ren's Resolve getting Surgical Distraction. And so you could make the argument about the mana here as well, because you know, if you can shut off the Ruby players from their mana, it makes them really hard to be able to kind of go. But right now they're sort of generating a lot of value off of things. The other argument is trying to fight when they go for a Past in Flames and waiting for those moments to go, oh, okay, you've generated a bunch of stuff and you're trying to replay everything now. I will strip away your Desperate Rituals here, or I'll strip away your Exile effects here, because you've basically gotten to the point where you've run out of gas and now you're deploying your Past in Flames to refuel and continue the cycling through of your deck to be able to get to a high enough storm count here. So there is that kind of like, when do you surgical is an important thing. And I do think it is very much dependent upon that. And there we see the Past in Flames has been revealed here. Next ritual does get resolved. Pyretic Ritual. Go down to 4. Cast Reckless Impulse. Again, we keep talking about you see it, oh, that normally costs 2, but because of the Ruby Medallion, everything is costing only 1 red. So that's kind of the power of it. Manamorphose. Now we got to start really digging into some value here, because not only are we generating a little bit of mana off it, but we're also sitting here and being able to draw the card. Just more and more value getting added to it. And Strike It Rich. Go down to 5, make a treasure token. This also has flashback there. But if you've never played against Storm, it is a lot of this sort of, okay, I've tried to interact, I've tried to do things. Now let's see how things go. Here's the Past in Flames. Let's see what we can dig. Right now there's no wish. That's the other thing that is needed, right? Most players are not running Grape Shot main board. They're wishing for those things. So we are seeing, okay, can we get to there? Bam, bam, bam. Go down to 1. Go up to 4. Go down to 3. Go up to 6. All right, and just sort of keep tracking it, right? 5 red, then go up to 8. All right, next Exile, but still no Wish at the moment, but 3 Manamorphose available there, as well as Valakut Awakening, as well as another Impulse here. So we stripped away 4 of the Impulses with Ren's Resolve, and there's still 4 more available here. But look at so much. I think there was a thing with the Manamorphose there of it going to the graveyard where it wasn't supposed to. Because you see there's the Exile pile right underneath the graveyard and when we're casting it. All right, treasure went up. And it's basically saying, show me the wish. There's the wish. The Ruby Storm player was going through it as if there was a Solitude available, because that messes up the math, right? If they go and they go through that whole thing and they're like, all right, this is Xaxes. This kills you, but, oh, wait, there's a Solitude here, and now things are stopped. And you just gain 4 more life, and I have just basically blew the whole load there and didn't get to kill you.
Gameplay to let you know about our new affiliate with Nerd Gear. Nerdgear.gg/NanMan will take you directly to the website, and as you can see, they've got a bunch of awesome gaming accessories, from playmats, life counters with the life tracks, playmat holders, and more. So make sure you do some browsing on the site, find some goodies, and then use the code NGNanMan for 5% off your entire order. But let's get back to our gameplay.
All right, let's get back to it. Game number 2 here. Post-sideboard stuff. We get a little bit more tools available. Now, if you're trying to think about what tools can we use, think about the ways to start taxing your opponents and slow them down, right? Dampening spheres, the silence effects, things like that are very important and very useful here. All right. Throwing a ritual into the graveyard here. That's an interesting thing. So normally you want to keep that ritual, but this is also trying to tell us that, oh wait, the player is looking for a land here. Right? Because it is a little risky to throw a ritual in the graveyard early, unless your hand has a lot of rituals already, and you're looking for exile effects. Right? There's a couple of like information gathering we can get from a player doing that play off their surveil there. And we see a Ketramose go to the graveyard here. That's another one, like, this is sort of slow. It doesn't really help us yet. We tapped out and played a Ketramose last turn, and it didn't do anything. But Thoughtseize, though, is pretty useful. Let's see what we got here. Manamorphose, Prismatic Ending, 2 Reckless Impulse, and 1 Ren's Resolve. So you have to kind of decide, do we care about you digging for things? Do we care about your removal here? What are we worried about with this hand? The fact that it's basically like doubled up on stuff does make it like, okay, where can we attack it? And we're going to attack it at this weak spot here. Oh, no other land. Missing a land drop is tough. All right, next Surveil land going to come out. Yeah, the Ruby Storm player just made the comment of, I was on the draw. I had a Surveil land. I've got basically everything else. I didn't want to mulligan down to 5. So I can understand that. Like, I've been in those situations too where it's like, I don't want to do it. Ooh, Teferi here. Doesn't really do much of an impact here. It does sort of like replace itself because it really just needing another land. And oh, no other land. Uptick Teferi. Nothing else. No other pressure or threats coming. But there's the second land. Ruby Storm player fetching, shocking. All of their cards are basically online now. So do they just go and dig? They could. They could start like doing the rituals. The problem is they don't have a Ral or a Ruby like they did in game number 1 there. So I like this. Ren's Resolve, exile those top 2. Got until next turn to be able to play those. Artist Talent is one of those that can help. You could level that up. All right, Surveil land. Again, there are 3 in the list here for the Esper Ketramose player because they, I like Surveil lands. We've talked about them a lot on the channel there, and Felia is going to be coming out next. This dog is a menace. I mean, it's really good in Legacy. It's really good in Modern. It's really good in Cube. And here's one of the reasons why it's so good is these sort of Riddler lines right here. So do some Blinky, swing for 2, drop the Ruby Storm player to 15. There's a land follow-up. ETB off the Riddler, draw a card. Counter goes on the Felia because it was our own permanent that got blinked. And we're going to dig with the Reckless Impulse again. Looks like we're responding. At least fetching. Losing some life here. Oh, okay. Force a negation here. So because the player has been short on mana and short on stuff that because they can cast they can play lands from their exile piles there with these impulses. So basically keeping them in check and basically saying nope, you can't do that is a hard stop for them, which is very tough if you're on the Ruby Storm player side of things. All right, Ketramose, only 2 cards in exile currently, nothing too crazy. Flicker. Ketramose does see itself going into exile, so we'll lose a life. We'll draw a card. And then Big Punchy's there for 7 damage. And just doing the, okay, just confirming life totals again, which is very important when you're playing, is constantly sit here and do the life total checks. Whenever there's a life total discrepancies or these moments of like, oh, what's your life total at, right? Just confirm it after, oh, I attack, drops you to this amount, right? It's a great habit to get into as you're trying to play here. But Manamorphose is going to be cast. This will get some mana off it, draw a card, be able to replace itself, and see if our Ruby Storm player can start chaining things together here. They did get a land. All right, there's the fetch. I like that, just saying, do we go for it? Do we have to try? At some point, you do have to try, right? You have to sit here and pull the trigger and go, do you have it? I think that's the thing about the combo decks in Modern, is a lot of it is just sort of, okay, I'm going to just shove here, right? This is that moment for me to try to find a way to thread this needle and push to make something happen. And we've got a way to help make something happen right here with the Rawl. So Rawl, Monsoon Mage, reducing the cost. Got 1 red mana. About to start chaining some rituals here. Manamorphose. Let's kind of test the water first. Replace itself. Draw a card. Take 1. Drop to... Yep. 2 red. Draw a card.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter. Is the funniest part. Like, it matters.
Okay, so this is now where we get to start seeing stuff go. All right. Ren's Resolve. Exile top 2. Every time we're casting it, we're still triggering Rawl here. Trying to get him to flip. Past in Flames. Still have 2 red. But yeah, we're scooping. We're scooping. The writing is on the wall. It's not looking good. Let's just go to game 3 here. And you see that sort of dig back into the sideboard to do a slight adjustment between game number 1 and game 2, as well as going into game 3. But it felt a lot of like game 1, Ruby Storm player did their thing. Game 2, Esper Ketramose player did their thing. So now we're going to see game 3, how things are going to work out between these two decks. Both players enter in with tap lands, surveilling a land to the bin. Do we have a Ruby or a Rawl to start things off? All right, fetch shock. Super cool Sacred Foundry. One of these days I'll probably pick those up, but it's going to be a while. I keep buying all these other, like, to build as many decks as possible instead of being like, I'm going to make this deck super spicy and super cool. I'm just like, I'm going to just buy even more and more pieces for Modern so I can be able to play as many different Modern decks as possible. Speaking of Modern, we do have the Pro Tour coming up next, or this coming weekend. All right, so we'll do some recaps of that coming out of like the meta, the top decks. Maybe we'll do some like commentary over top of some of the matches at some point. We'll see. Well, there's going to be some cool stuff to be able to showcase. I expect to see, you know, a pretty consistent meta that we've seen on the channel as well. All right, there's going to be some Amulet. I think there's going to be some Storm. There's going to be some Goryo's Vengeance decks. You know, there's going to still be Boros Energy. But, ooh, okay, Manamorphose Response, Pitch the Solitude, and Ephemerate it here to keep it alive. And now Manamorphose. So you're doing this before the trigger, or before the Manamorphose resolves, after the trigger off the roll, right? Because you don't assume they're going to flip it right away, but you want to be able to fight and react early enough with it. All right, dropping a 19. Next Surveil land coming up. But at least we have this 3-2 lifelinker, because that's going to add a little bit of pressure on the Ruby Storm player, right? Can they deal with this quickly enough before the life totals get out of hand? Because that lifelink does make a big difference here. Keep the Ephemerate in exile here. Ooh, a lot of tools available. First one coming out, Disruption with a Thoughtseize. All right, what do we got here? Ritual, Past in Flames, Hex Magic, and a mystery card. Grape Shot. Okay, that is one of the grape shots there. I was like, I don't know which Strixhaven Japanese archive this is. And it is Grape Shot. So what are you taking here? Do you go for the mana? Do you go for the Hex Magic and stop them from doing? Because Hex Magic is one of those newer cards that just got released. And yep, that's what's going to get grabbed. So if you're not familiar with Hex Magic is exile all cards from your hand, then draw that many cards until the end of your next turn. You may play the cards exile this way. So basically in a position like that where you're like, oh, I have a bunch of stuff that I can get to later, right? You know, I can maybe generate a bunch of mana first and then utilize it. So basically, new edition, it has replaced one of those impulse type effects that the deck had before. The one that used to make the Eldrazi spawns if you don't play the cards. I can't remember the name of which one that one was. But we see Rahl getting deployed here. Cost reduction taking place. Are we pushing? Grape Shot. Second spell this turn. Trigger is good. And Grape Shot is good. Storm count is 2, so 2 of the copies will go at Solitude and 1 will go at face there, because the Storm count is how many times this spell gets copied. So it has the original cast plus the additional ones. All right, so cleared up the lifelink here. And again, there's some tools, right? There is, it looks like a Surgical and an Orum's Chant here. But having a Grape Shot in the graveyard is actually pretty useful for the Storm player because they have Past in Flames available to them. Ren's Resolve going to get deployed here. Of course, every spell does get a flip, and that's another life lost. Odds are life lost. Evens are option to flip. Ooh, another Ren's Resolve is nice. And let's do Resolve again. Trigger. Another point of damage. Also, thing to note is the number of instants and sorceries that get cast in a turn, because this is so far the second instant and sorcery, which then could help with Rahl flipping whenever he does, because then it can be able to turn into additional loyalty for him to be able to ultimate. But Pyretic Ritual, another point of damage there, so that's our third spell. But this is a great little moment here between both these players because it is these windows of opportunity to respond, right? I'd like to cast this spell. I would like to trigger Rahl, right? Because this gives the opponent those options. You may respond to the cast. You may respond to the trigger. You may, all these little moments for you to be able to respond as the opponent before things get out of hand. Yeah, I'm a big fan of those space basics. I have them in a lot of my commander decks, and I have not added a lot of them to my modern decks at the moment. But they just look super cool. One's the Edge of Eternities, the others is the Infinity ones. All right, Desperate Ritual. Ooh. Go to 5 red. Choose not to flip. Fourth spell, Past in Flames. Let's see the trigger. Not flipping. Responding to that, there's the Orum's Chant. No more spells can be cast this turn. So that's that window of being able to pounce and fight. Surgical the Past in Flames here. Strip away. And now this makes it infinitely harder for the Ruby Storm player. Because they've spent all this time getting all of these tools into their graveyard. Now they can't use them with the flashback with Past in Flames. There still is a chance for them to bring it back because there's one. You see, 3 Past in Flames are gone. 1 more sits in the sideboard for you to be able to go and wish for. That's the thing about Ruby Storm is it has this mix of here's sideboard tools that I can use, but also here's a bunch of toolboxy stuff that I get to be able to wish for during the match. And like an extra Past in Flames is one of those little bit of toolboxy cards that you get. All right, another Surveil land. But you see basically the amount of resources have been depleted on both sides here. Rahl exists, and that is still a very scary threat to be able to flip. Our Ketramose player is low on tools, though. Whatever they had, they kept on top. Passing turn there. All right, 1 point of damage. End step, Felia comes in. Ooh, losing 2 life, going to 15. Solitude. Flip the Solitude. Puts extra pressure here by doing this. Because Doggo will deal 2, Solitude comes back, no targets, puts a counter on Felia. Ruby Storm player is going to be fetching. But now the Ketramose player is hellbent. So there is this like moment here for the Ruby Storm player to capitalize on this. They lost their Rahl, but they've got ways to find some, they can start chaining things together again. All right, some impulses, stuff like that, definitely can help. Ooh, Prismatic Ending is good. Gets rid of the dog. You saw that debate, right? It was not an impulse effect to kind of dig, but it's a way to kind of potentially keep ourselves going, even though the life swap does kind of happen here. 18 now to 7. See the debate. How do we get out of this? We need to get access to a wish. Find Past in Flames. That's the line we're looking for. There's the wish. It's dangerous, though, to just go for it now because there is no... We don't have the mana to be able to cast Past in Flame and go, right? We don't have Rahl. We don't have a Ruby Medallion. So if we get that and then that just gets, stripped away with the Thought Seize, we just get put in a bad spot. Brotherhood End is what we grab here to wipe the board, stabilizing things, knowing that we still have all these wishes left in the deck to go for. Manamorphose. Let's start digging. Oh, that's a great setup here. Ruby Medallion. Pass. So now we've got a lot more live draws. Valakut Awakening. Basically swap in our hand a bit. Put any number of cards from your hand. The bottom of your library, draw that many. Plus 1 extra. So 2 on the bottom will draw 3 cards here. Manamorphose. Surveil land. Binning another land. Rahl. Oh. Manamorphose trigger. Do we flip 2 spells, 2 instants and sorceries? Valakut and Manamorphose? You see the debate. It's like, Is it safer to do that because then we get out of the solitude potential? So yeah, it looks like we are going to go for the flip. Okay, so we say yes. You may flip it. It'll have 2 extra counters. It'll be at 4, but I'm going to road it before Manamorphose gets to resolve here, because it's like trigger resolves, finishes resolving. Then I'm going to sit here and respond before the spell resolves because we're still in the stack mode there. So a road will go off. Manamorphose goes off. Then we get to draw a card, but nothing else to go with it. So ways to respond for the Ketramose player, but no threats, it looks like. So plenty of chances for the Ruby Storm player to try to capitalize like we saw right there. But that was kind of met with a second Ruby. All right, Solitude's going to get flashed in. We're going to try to close the game out, it looks like, with Solitude here. Force of Negation is in hand, so that's going to be pretty useful. Another land. But Ral's nice. No way to deal with Ral. All right, do some blocking. Life totals jumps up to 24, but still alive. Ooh, Impulse here. Okay, digging. Prismatic Ending doesn't help us. Is it another ritual? There's the handshake. Oof. Oh, the wish was off the top. Oof. Man, the rubies were what we needed, because you needed the ruby plus the wish to be able to go and find the Past in Flames. Force and Negations were there ready, though. Yeah, so knowing that the only out is Wish because of all the Desperate Rituals that got exiled there. But we get to see a glimpse of what sideboard cards got brought in here. Of course, the Dovin's Veto, 2 Force Negations, 2 Orum's Chant. Ways to kind of fight over what the deck is trying to do. Prismatic Endings brought in, which we saw them being very useful against the dog. So, not too bad of a match there. Of course, don't forget to subscribe, follow along, because we will be having more Modern action every Monday, as well as our Legacy content that's coming out every Thursday here. But that's going to do it for us here today. Thanks so much for tuning and watching, y'all, and I'll see you all next game.